Welcome to Nightlight. Step away from the mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is a time of awakening, of sharing and evolving, of spreading our wings and soaring on the cosmic breath of creation. Come and join with other light-minded spirits as we weave our lights together to seek understanding, enlightenment, and with a little luck, some wisdom. This is Nightlight, a reminder that you are never alone.
And we have a great lineup for this evening. Tonight's show is kicking off several UFO-themed shows. It's like Halloween in August and September, but I don't think anyone will complain. It's about a month until the Mothman Festival, and we have Mothman, Keel, cryptid researchers joining us tonight. Start off with JACI and BILL KOUSOULAS. They are the authors of Bridging the Tragedy, Silver Linings in the Mysterious Ohio River Valley, and they will be returning this year to present at the Mothman Festival, which is Saturday, September 16th, and Sunday the 17th. We also have Steve Ward. He's the host of the always thought-provoking High Strangeness Factor, and he is the MC. But wait, there's more. We also have leading tri-state cryptid researcher Brian Seech returning for about his third show. And, we're glad Bill could join us on his birthday. Happy birthday, Bill. Try to get Rob Halford to sing happy birthday to you, but, you may have to settle for Jeff Walmsley or the Frick Brothers if they call in. So, glad everyone is here for tonight's all-star Mothman, cryptid, Ohio Valley strange happenings show. So, how's everyone doing?
Great.
Wow.
Good. Really good, thanks.
Okay. Maybe we should start off with Steve, since you can find him at the museum, and he is one of the big wigs at the festival. So, Steve, what's the latest from the museum? Let's talk a little bit about the festival lineup and speakers, all the events going on. What if people descend on Point Pleasant in about a month? What will they experience?
Hear that, Brian? I'm a bigwig. Write that down. Okay. But
I just did.
Well, everything's going on. Jeff Walmsley, he has just retired, after, I think, 16 years in graphic design. And now he's got even more time to create stuff. He has been working on an escape room themed on the whole Mothman situation. And there's all kinds of new things going on. I see he's done some rearranging and added some stuff in the Mothman Museum. People are always thrilled to be there. I talked to a family from Nicaragua last week. People come from all over the world. I mean, it's just amazing. People will be descending on the Mothman Festival. Parking will probably be a challenge. And I wish I had the book in front of me, but there's a line, there's a paragraph in the Mothman Prophecies that John Keel writes, almost as if he was psychically tuning in to the future and seeing the Mothman Festival. And he talks about how it was open season of the human race, that they marched down from the muddy hollers across the back roads, and he's talking about the creatures and the weird things going on. But man, it sounds to me like the Mothman Festival attendees. It was huge last year. I expect it to be even bigger this year. Got a great lineup of speakers. Bill and Jackie will be there speaking. I will be speaking on John Keel. Boy, there's just so much to say. One thing you have to be aware of. If you get there early Saturday morning, go right to the information booth and get your ticket for the TNT Hayride. The TNT, of course, is that area 9 miles north of Point Pleasant, where the Mothman was first seen. And we take people out and into the dead of night on Saturday night, 3 hayrides. And it's set up a little bit like a Halloween hayride. I even have gotten a bunch of stuff in from Amazon today and collected from some of the critters I used to put out front in my Halloween display in Michigan. And you're going to see some of them in the shadows with their eyes lit up, and just to try and give a little bit of extra, kick to the festival. But you will meet the men in black. They're guaranteed fly over the Mothman. There's so much going on, and there's so much to see, both history, the real history. I know the weird history much better, but it's people just absolutely love Point Pleasant and have so much fun at the festival.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, Jackie and Bill, you are returning for 2 years in a row. What is your presentation about this year?
Well, hey, Mark, thanks for having us on again. Last year, we had the good fortune to be able to release our book, Bridging the Tragedy, just a week before the festival. So we really debuted it at the festival. We gave a presentation last year about the methods that we followed and the system we had set up, the research plan, and the people who we interviewed and the things that we found in the book. And we're going to go a little bit more into that again this year. We do have a second version of the book that's going to be coming out that we hope to have shipped to the museum here coming up in the next few days. Jackie just got the final draft uploaded today. And we're going to be debuting that. And that's one that has updated cover art, and it also has illustrations in it. So we have all kinds of pictures that we snapped of people who we interviewed for the book last year or 2 years ago when we began it, as well as some different landmarks and some different snapshots that we think will make good sense for people. And we have a foreword that was written by one of our participants' sisters. They had lost their sister-in-law in the Silver Bridge disaster. So we'll be talking about that a little bit too. And we're also going to be debuting our research plan for our next book, the next study, and we'll be looking for participants for that project too. So we'll be talking about that during our presentation as well.
Okay. Jackie, how does it feel to return to the lineup of for a second year and visiting Point Pleasant for the upteenth time?
It's really exciting for me. because Bill doesn't. We never went to the Mothman Festival itself until last year when we presented. But I thrive in that kind of environment, and I am so excited. I'm curious to see how many people or how packed it'll be this year, because last year was just absolutely crazy.
Yeah, and what was the estimate? It was like 25,000 people.
You know, I heard 25,000. I also heard 30,000. So I'm not positive. When we were just out there a few weeks ago, Jeff said he thought it was more like 15. But what does he know?
I think 15 to 20,000 sounds about right.
But there are probably more people on Main Street during that, the Saturday and Sunday than county the rest of the year.
Probably.
But it looked very well attended, and we'll have to talk about getting together for Friday night kickoff dinner at the Village Pizza later too. But Brian, you've been down there, or do you need a ride down on Friday?
I don't know if I'm going to make it this year. Probably not, but I don't want to count myself out yet. I loved it. We were there last year. Fortunate enough to speak there twice. Hopefully next year, maybe again. 10-10 Steve Ward. And
Brian, you have to make it. We got the Bigfoot suit and the dunk tank already.
It's just to say that Jeff Walmsley and even Steve is a big part of it too. The John and Tim Frick, these guys do an awesome job. They pour their heart out into this festival. It is one of the best festivals in the United States, no doubt. Whoever's listening has not been there, please go. I mean, you're going to have such a great time. You really are.
Oh, it's without a doubt the best festival in the state, as well as the greater Ohio Valley.
Exactly.
And it's so unique. I mean, I guess there are other cryptid festivals, but this one has so much going for it. The history and the folklore, and like I say, the real history of the American Revolution and so forth. It's just and the people here are really friendly. And one thing I'm grateful for is I just live up the street now. I don't have to come down early and get a room, 2 years beforehand and carry all the stuff down that I need. So that's a blessing.
Steve, I wanted to, when you said that, the artwork too in Point Pleasant is second to none, with the statues and the mural.
Yes.
I mean,
so on the flood wall.
Yes.
Yeah. And Bob Roach has done other sculptures, not just the majestic Mothman, but if you walk down the flood wall along the river, you'll see Daniel Boone, Chief Cornstalk, Mad Ann Bailey. You go a little further, and you'll hit Tewendaway Park, where the two rivers come together. Chief Cornstalk is buried there, and the first battle of the Revolutionary War took place. Also, a couple blocks north of the museum, you see where the Silver Bridge used to be on 6th Street. It used to go over to Ohio. There's a mural there and a memorial and the 46 names of the people that died on the bridge. So there's within a short walking distance, you can see so much.
Okay. JACI and Bill, Steve just mentioned one of the points in your book that I wanted to bring up, and might as well just get into it since Steve just made reference to the memorial. On 285 of your Bridging the Tragedy, you have Table 5, and you show about 6 of the dimensions of post-traumatic growth, and you have meaning is corresponds with a memorial. Can you explain a little bit about what you mean in that table 5 and how memorials help a town to overcome such a horrific event that Point Pleasant experienced?
Sure. Hey, Mark, you threw a curveball at me here. That's kind of a complex question. I don't have the book in front of me, but thankfully, Jackie and I have been editing through version 2 to make sure we've got all of our ducks in a row. So I am kind of recently well-versed with taking a look at those tables again, and thank goodness, because otherwise I wouldn't know where to go with this. But the table you're referring to, basically, the way that we set the book up in the first place is it's literally written like a doctoral dissertation. So it's got the 5 chapters that you would have for a dissertation, which are the introduction and the literature review and methodology and the data analysis and then the conclusions. But it's got all the interviews interspersed in between those. So that really made it more humanizing than just an academic paper. So what you're talking about is the table where we basically tied into what we found in the study to the existing or pre-existing psychological literature. So what you're referring to was meaning and memorial. Meaning was one of the dimensions of post-traumatic growth that we got from the literature review, which is just to give you kind of a background in what existing literature is out there. And then what corresponded to that with memorial was people really, you don't want to say celebrate because you're not celebrating a bridge disaster, right? I mean, that's a horrific event, no question. But it's important to commemorate what happened with those people. And so with respect to the meaning, the memorials let people kind of crystallize their taking of meaning from that horrific event. So you've got the statues, you've got the murals that Jackie was talking about, and you've got the different ceremonies. All these different things serve to commemorate where we've come from as a society or as a community in Point Pleasant, Gallipolis, Ohio, and where we are today. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, and we've done so many shows on mounds and earthworks that I think that listeners realize that building a mound at the confluence of a creek and a river or wherever they want the site was chosen, it is acknowledging that an ancestor was laid to rest there. It's not denying that they were never part of the community. And as I was going back through your book to prepare for tonight's discussion, with all the research you and Jackie did on post-traumatic growth, it sounds like the people of over time, the people of Point Pleasant processed what happened, and they went about dealing with the situation the right way, where so many people who were affected went on to become outstanding members of the community. Is that a fair portrayal?
I think so. Did you want to talk about a couple of the people that Mark's referring to?
Oh, I was, if Jackie wants to talk about a couple examples, that's fine. I just if listeners didn't hear last year's show where we spoke about post-traumatic growth, I was trying to do a lead-in to the theme of bridging the tragedy and how, say, Table 5 actually shows that the community and church and everyone rallied together to get through this difficult time.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the community of Point Pleasant did such a fantastic job of really rallying around one another. We talked to so many really interesting people. I think one of the biggest examples of post-traumatic growth would have been a gentleman by the name of Jimmy Wedge. Did you want to talk about Jimmy a little bit, Jackie?
Jimmy Wedge lost both of his parents when the bridge collapsed, and he was such an excellent interview, and he was so fun. And we were really humbled when he came forward and volunteered to be part of the study, because he never really gave interviews before the past, like maybe one other interview. And so we were just really humbled that he wanted to actually be part of our study. And, him losing both of his parents, he was, we really didn't know what to expect. But what I expected was that he would be different than what he was, because that he was so grateful for being 25 when the bridge went down and his parents passed away, that he was old enough to understand it, and that he was grateful that he wasn't a younger person that would not have been able to process all of that. And at the time, he was a head coach of the boys high school basketball team. He went on later to become the mayor of Point Pleasant, and then later served in legislation for West Virginia. So there's a huge example of post-traumatic growth.
Okay. So did Jimmy attribute a specific event or a mentor helping him? How did he go through this? Losing both parents at the same time, and comes out the other side as someone who had a very prosperous career in local politics.
Well, Jimmy told us that he was the youngest. I'm sorry, go ahead.
You can go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, Jimmy told us he was the youngest of, I think, 4 kids. And he was 25 at the time, so meaning his siblings were at least a few years older than he was. But he did say that he had an uncle, his dad's brother, I believe, who flew in from Florida, and he was like a corporate vice president of an airline, if I remember correctly. And Jimmy said that he really he was only there for a week, but he made sure and took care of the funeral arrangements, the burials, and really took care of the business affairs so that the adult kids, Jimmy and his siblings, really wouldn't have to deal with that. And he said that he was really grateful that his uncle had come in. He said he stepped in and just did a fantastic job. But other than that, Jimmy really talked about, I think, really gathering strength from his siblings and just had a real sense of family and community with them. And then he said the community of Point Pleasant was exceptionally supportive. He said it's just that kind of a little town. When people need something, there's somebody there to help. And we heard that from many of the people we talked to.
And I also, maybe if I'm wrong, but I also believe that during the interview, he said that when he made decisions in his life, he was always able to kick things off of his mom. His mom was the one that was always there to give him sound advice, and she was a very matter of fact about it. So he said that when he would talk or try to make life choices, he would think about, would my mom and dad be proud of me in the choice he's making?
Yeah, he mentioned that his mom was very much kind of a recluse. I mean, she managed the household and took care of the family, but she didn't socialize and didn't do much outside of the house at all. But she ran that house like a really tight ship. The dad was a little bit more of an outgoing kind of a guy. He was soft-spoken, but he was a businessman, and he worked out of town as a corporate vice president also. But with mom, and one of the things that sticks out in my head is that Jimmy said that he could go to his parents if he got into a little bit of a financial bind, and he could talk to them. He said, Mom would give me hell. He said she'd read me the riot act, and then she'd give me the money. He says, when your mom and dad are both gone, you don't really have anybody to lean on. So he said, I really miss that.
Okay, this unfortunate event happened when Jimmy was 25. With the research you've done for Bridging the Tragedy and the other trauma book you're working on, have you noticed age playing the age at which the traumatic event happened is a way to minimize the impact? Has that been investigated by other people, or or your conclusions similar to what other researchers are saying?
Well, post-traumatic growth as a phenomenon is about a 20 or 25-year-old concept. It's relatively new. Whenever we mention the word post-traumatic, the first thing people think of course, is post-traumatic stress disorder. So post-traumatic growth is kind of a counterintuitive thing, because you don't stop to think when you're going through really difficult, challenging, painful circumstances, what good is going to come next, because you're usually focused on the pain. But once you start working through that and find ways to be able to grow past it, we did find a lot of things common. I mean, there were a lot of things that we found in the literature review for, pre-existing studies that were done about post-traumatic growth that did really correspond pretty directly to what we found when we interviewed the people in the Ohio Valley. And a lot of that, it seems to me that age certainly can help. Now, Jimmy Wedge was 25 at the time of the disaster, and when we interviewed him, he was 79 years old. So he was the oldest of the people that we interviewed. After him, there were, I think, 2 or 3 people that were in like the 72-year-old range. So they would have been 18 years old when this happened. And the rest of them kind of went a little bit younger than that. Jeff Walmsley was the youngest. And he would have been, I think, 6 when it happened and 60 when we interviewed him. So Jimmy, I mean, certainly from what I was able to gather from the work that we did, seemed to really be able to illustrate more things of post-traumatic growth or dimensions of post-traumatic growth than the others did. But I think part of that was because he was older. Part of it was because he was really connected with his family and the communities in general. He got a lot of support from them too. But we did find, as well as in other cases prior to our study, that faith plays a big role. If you have a faith in a higher power or God or religion or what have you, some sense of spirituality, that kind of tends to give meaning to circumstances that seem like they're so horrific that you wonder why they even happened. So that's certainly an aspect that goes across many different areas in these types of things. But the community, family, and then focusing on personal development and taking good perspectives, those things are all they're a little universal. They're in all kinds of different studies that we've looked at, and they also showed up in this one.
Interesting. Keep reading your book. It brings out questions like that. It's not just a recap of the legend. You're going into realms that really aren't associated with what happened, but you make the entire story more personal, and people can extract lessons from your interviews with those who were there or saw something in the immediate aftermath. It's I think a very thought-provoking book.
Thank you for that. I mean, we really feel like the best parts of the book are the individual interviews, where you get to see, the way that these people perceive what happened in their lives. And certainly Silver Bridge disaster is front and center in the book. But there are people who did speak of their paranormal encounters as well. In fact, we had a couple people who participated who spoke almost specifically about their paranormal encounters. And then I think 3 or 4 other ones talked about seeing UFOs, which was pretty neat.
The stories in the book are riveting, and especially if you have a connection to Point Pleasant, some of the people and the families, it really brings it home. But it's a book you seriously cannot put down.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I agree with Steve.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
And Brian, you're at the opposite end of the Ohio River Valley, and just a short canoe ride upstream from me. But as you cover all these paranormal events in the Northern Panhandle, Western Pennsylvania, Eastern Ohio, even Keel mentions New Cumberland and Weirton. Have you encountered stories similar to what JACI and Bill have been discussing? There's maybe the Browns Island factory explosion might be something comparable, but with at least with the individual eyewitnesses who have seen a Bigfoot type creature, are they having like expressing post-traumatic growth, or at least having some kind of life-changing event?
Well, it's interesting. We've been down here now. We live in as you know, Mark, we live in Weirton, which for people, Weirton, West Virginia, which is in Hancock County, and people who don't know exactly where that is, if you see a map, we're that little, we always say that we're the tip of the middle finger of West Virginia, right? We're in that little slice between Ohio and PA. And so we've been here about, actually it was we bought our house actually 2 years ago, I think 2 days ago actually. And so we've been down here 2 years, and so far we are starting to get reports. Actually, we got a report of the best I can describe it is a Jersey Devil type creature. The guy drew it for us. We're going to meet with him here in a couple weeks, and he actually saw it fairly close to where we live here in Hancock County. And it changed his life, because after he saw that, he started to get really interested in UFOs and all paranormal phenomena. And he actually, and then this was years ago when he saw it. He didn't give me a time frame, but it had to be at least probably 15 years ago. Now he has talked to people and who he's going to get us in touch with of people seeing Black Panther reports in this area. And we just got a report of a gentleman who claims he saw one of these Black Panthers here by a dump here in Brooke County, which is the next county over from Hancock. And already, since we've been here, we've already received like 3 winged entity reports. We just call them winged entities. We just group them all together. We don't say Mothman, humanoids. We don't know what they are. We call them winged entities. And several Bigfoot reports, not many yet. We hold an event called the Tomlinson Run Bigfoot Days. And Mark, you were here for this one a couple months ago. And people are starting to finally talk. Even the one, we had an eyewitness who finally talked about this creature called the Beast of Bell Hill. Bell Hill is a small road about 1.5 miles long. It's not that long. We actually live about 5 miles or so from it. And during the 80s, there was a series of basically animal mutilations, people hearing strange noises, grain being eaten out of barns, a dead calf in a tree. I mean, there was all kind of weird things.
Wow.
And no one knew exactly what it was. They said, hey, there was a Black Panther sighting. This creature was an alien. This creature was a Bigfoot. So we actually finally talked to a gentleman I did last November, who he claims that the creature he saw was a Bigfoot-type creature, which actually chased him from the woods down to him and 3 of his friends down to the house. And he said this was like a cinnamon-colored ape-like creature that chased them. And I asked him, he actually still lives on the Bellevue area. When he saw it was about 80, 81. And he claims that on another occasion, he went up into this field where they saw this creature. And a couple years later, there was a calf all tore up. Didn't know what did it. And occasionally, I think he would hear screams, but nothing recent. So, but no, there does seem to be when people see these things, especially Bigfoot, there's a marked reaction. There's a stress factor. I've talked to several witnesses who, after they see a Bigfoot and they talk about it years later, they get goosebumps up and down their arm. It is a real phenomenon to these people. They've seen something that should not exist. And yeah, there's definitely a factor, of if you see something that's not supposed to be there. So I can't wait to read their book, guys. And it's going to be out now. I want to get the second edition because there's even more in it. But yeah, and that's what we need more of too. I applaud Bill and Jackie for focusing too on that end of it. So many times people are just focusing on the creature or the event and not the actual psychological effects that these things bring to people.
I think it's next. I think it's next week's show. We'll be delving more into the changes that happen after an abduction or sighting. So that's I want to start the show off by saying what the 4 guests tonight are probably going to be discussing are themes that are probably going to come up over the next tonight and the following 2 weeks. But Brian, with like the calf in a tree, panthers, they're they have been known in the area, and supposedly they were hunted to extinction as people began settling the area. That's documented in, I think, Caldwell's 1880, recounting of the history of Jefferson and Belmont counties. But just because someone said they're now extinct, doesn't mean that he had the trail cams and tagging equipment that is available today to make such an accurate claim. So, I believe, they could still be in the area.
Yeah, basically, if you talk to the DNR in Pennsylvania, they're going to tell you there's no reproducing. That would be mountain lions in PA. Any that are being seen are either misidentification of bobcats, or if they are mountain lions at all, then they're escaped pets or escaped animals from an animal farm or animal zoo, things like that. But it's interesting. I was up at a Pittsburgh, an outdoor show. And sometimes, you go to these outdoor shows, if you can get some of these DNR guys, kind of like off to the side and things like that. They said, we believe that, in Indiana County, there's been at least 3 of them seen up there. And he told me, he kind of like off record, but we're not allowed to talk about it. So, again, I think that there are some like the Black Panther. Now this is a different kind of animal. Now there are they say that a lot of the mountain lions can go into a melanistic phase, and they could be black, but it just a lot of this stuff just doesn't make sense. And I actually just tonight I was at Fred Saluga, and Fred, who'll be on your show coming up, and one of the gentleman, his name is Scott. He's lived in this area all of his life, and he mentioned, there's been a Black Panther sighting down there too. And I'm like, even the gentleman who saw the winged entity, the Jersey Devil type creature, he says, he goes, I'll have to introduce you. I know at least 2 people that have claimed they've seen him. So, we've got like winged entities and Black Panthers down here with Bigfoot. So it's fun. We're having a blast down here. It's a whole new world for us. The whole northern panhandle is, we're going to be doing events all year, including Cabela's in November, and we hope to try to get a lot of reports out of this area. So we're trying to hit it hard in the next 3 months.
Okay, let's go back to Steve. Steve, when people are converging on Point Pleasant, you have the Athens Messenger. Is that the newspaper office?
Mary Hire was a stringer for the Athens Messenger. There's a Point Pleasant newspaper, I think, is. I'm not sure where it is actually, where the office is. It's right there downtown.
But people can walk around town and explore the area as well, and we'll walk in the Mary Hire and John Keel as they recount writing the Mothman prophecies.
Yeah, her office when she was there was right on 6th Street, little white building. And, that was the same street where the bridge collapsed. That's the same place where Mary Hyre was visited by some very strange characters we put under the heading of Men in Black. And, of course, John Keel and Mary Hyre were friends and colleagues. And when the TNT area got so saturated with lines of people going in there, even a lot of them carrying guns and bow and arrows, thinking they were going to bag themselves a Mothman, they headed south down to Galapagos Ferry, deep into the hollers. And it can be pretty desolate down there now. I mean, a lot of people live down there, but imagine what it was like a half a century ago. And they found places where they could just sit on a lonely hill and watch all the strange lights go over. They had a lot of experiences. But I encourage people to read some of John Keel's stuff, his articles, the Mothman Prophecies. He was so far ahead of everybody, and I think still is. I remember Nick Redfern writing in one of his books that John Keel was always ahead of his time, and whatever afterlife domain he is now, he probably still is. So, there's a lot of people that will talk to you about the area. It used to be you didn't talk about this stuff. I talked to some of the old timers that said, back in the 60s, you were crazy if you had an experience and you talked to somebody. There's still witnesses coming forward. I mean, Linda Sigmund is going to be speaking at the festival. She saw this winged something when she was 16, about 12 miles north of Point Pleasant, along with some kind of a strange light. So if you go into the Mothman Museum, there's a great lineup of books, including two that Jeff Wamsley has written, Mothman, The Facts Behind the Legend, and Mothman Behind the Red Eyes. And he went back and interviewed some of the original witnesses that hadn't been talked to for decades. So these books are just really valuable. And all the information in the museum is very valuable. And I might also add, they've got 5 documentaries running all at the same time. And if you happen to go all the way to the back and watch the one that is called The Mothman Legacy, you may just get lucky enough to see my handsome countenance in there a few times as it plays.
Kind of like seeing the back of Brian in the actual Mothman Prophecies movie.
Oh, no, he was we saw his front, but it was like in the next county.
Jealousy, Steve.
I know it. I was not in the Mothman Prophecies, and I don't know. I thought my screen test was so much better than Brian's.
Yeah, at least you could see your face.
Maybe that's what killed it for me.
Okay, and in JACI and Bill's book, as well as Keel's, the Mothman Prophecies, the whole Kanawha Valley corridor actually has a lot of Mothman sightings. There's one in Dunbar, was something along I-64 where a craft landed on the interstate. But JACI and Bill argue that there were sightings, a couple sightings prior to the more famous one at the TNT area that got the whole Mothman legend started. JACI and Bill, do you want to talk about the early sighting in was it Clendening?
Sure. So in Clendenin, West Virginia, there were three or four grave diggers in a cemetery that were taking care of their business, digging a hole. And they happened to look up and saw a brown flying humanoid just a few days before the first sighting took place in the TNT area. So that was the very first encounter, and around that time, other strange things were happening with the gentleman named Woody Derenberger. He had encountered the alleged spaceman Indrid Cold in the Parkersburg area. So there were some really weird things happening and some sightings of Mothman prior to the Scarberries and the Millettes meeting up with Mothman in the TNT area.
There were also some sightings of a sort of a man-bird-like creature. It didn't really look a lot like the Mothman, but up around the Elk River Valley around World War I. This is reported in the Haunted Valley by John Gay. And another, just kind of an interesting side note, there was another bridge collapse. It was over the Elk River. Now, this is way back in 1904, I believe is the year. But it also took place on December 15th.
At a confluence.
Yeah, right at another confluence. Go ahead, dear. Tell them about that.
Yeah, that's it. Oh, go ahead. Oh, yes, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead, Steve. I was just pointing that out. I'm sorry.
No. I thought he was telling me to go ahead, but I was done.
Well, I wouldn't call you dear, Steve. At least
darn it, Jackie. You go ahead.
Well, I was just adding that the 1904 Elk River Bridge collapse was at another confluence. It was the Canal River and the Elk River, I believe.
Okay.
Or the one in Point Pleasant.
We went there. We went there
really?
A couple times. Once, I think in 2020, Steve, when we met you. I want to say it was the same trip that we were on when we met you the first time, and we went to the confluence of the rivers. And there is a Holiday Inn that backs up right to the Elk and the Kanawha rivers, right? You can kind of walk down underneath the bridge and get down there by the water and take a look. And I was really drawn to that area. I took off. I'm not a runner, but I took off kind of sprinting towards the confluence, and Jackie thought I was going to fall right into the river. But you can sense. I don't know. Maybe it's in my head because I'm so into the whole Mothman thing, but I felt a weird energy there too.
Does the December 15th date have some kind of? Does it establish a pattern, or is it just coincidence of just two events?
I know that John Keel, who of course was in contact with many individuals he called silent contactees, they firmly believed they were in contact with some kind of a entity or space brother or whatever, and they would all start to get these predictions. Well, the predictions started to converge. There was going to be some big event, and then the big event was going to happen on December 15th. It was going to be an EM effect, whatever that meant. More misdirection, I think. But so that's the only thing I can think of. I think probably the other bridge collapsing on the same date was coincidence. But who really knows? I mean, who really knows what's going on behind the scenes? When we get a lot deeper into all this.
Interestingly enough, earlier this year, my sister-in-law texted me a picture of a newspaper article from the Dixon Telegraph, Dixon, Illinois. Jackie and I live in northern Illinois. And she had, in this article, it showed where there was a gentleman who's from the Dixon area who has researched all kinds of Dixon history for many, many years. And he talked about the Truesdell Bridge collapse, which happened, I think, in 1873 or something like that, shortly after the Civil War. Believe it or not, 46 people lost their lives in that bridge disaster also.
My God.
And it was mostly women and children, and it was because it was a baptismal ceremony, and men didn't typically attend that type of stuff back then, apparently. And so they were standing on the bridge. The women and the children were standing on the bridge watching the other children get baptized when the bridge collapsed.
Wow.
So we were surprised to hear that. And, we basically talk about the Silver Bridge disaster as being the deadliest bridge collapse in American history, which it is. But in the Truesdale Bridge disaster, as many lives were lost. And actually, there were significantly more people who were injured than there were in the Silver Bridge disaster. Just kind of an interesting sidebar.
When you do hear coincidences like that, it does give you pause. That maybe there's something, some connection that we just can't even fathom.
Absolutely. I know Keel talked about that, and a lot of other researchers that are his contemporaries, look for those connections. And whenever you find them, it certainly, like to use Brian's phrase, it makes the hair on your arms kind of stand up.
Oh, it also does invoke the possibility of like a reincarnation kind of theme.
It does. It's interesting that you mentioned the reincarnation theme too, because when we interviewed Susan Sayer, who is Brittany's mom, Brittany is one of Jeff's employees in the museum, and Susan is as well. But she had talked about having met a lady at the Cerrito Canova Fall Fest or Autumn Fest that they have out in that area. And they met her several years ago. And when she approached them, she said, I have to talk to you guys. She said, I really cannot stand being in water, and it really bothers me. And she went on and on and on about things. And she said that she went to a psychic who told her that in a previous life she died on the bridge when the bridge collapsed, and she was reincarnated shortly after that, which was really interesting. That's in our book as well, in Susan's interview.
Jackie and Bill, you bring up Andy Colvin's life experiences in your book. He has a lot of paranormal experiences. Jackie and I have spoken a little bit about his insights into one of the factories there in the Kanawha Valley. Anyhow, does Andy see any prophecies from these events? Keel was contacted by people about, something strange is going to happen on the East Coast. He really didn't know what, but psychics or someone contacted him. So it seems like there are some reoccurring patterns in this stretch of the river. It could be around the world as well. But what were some of the insights that Andy brought to your research?
Well, I think for the most part, the insights that he brought and our questions to him were specifically more Mothman related and paranormal related than they were bridge disaster related, because he was in the North Charleston area when the bridge disaster happened and when Mothman was going on. And he and Harriet, who is also in the book, Harriet Plumbrook, were neighbors. And so when we talked to them, we talked specifically about their paranormal encounters first and foremost, although they did both talk about the bridge a little bit too. They were just young and they weren't in Point Pleasant, so they weren't as directly impacted as the folks who were right there at ground zero. So, Andy basically talked about how what he noticed was after he had his encounters, which one of them was when he and his mom and dad were driving to a bowling alley around the same time as a lot of the sightings were happening in Point Pleasant. He felt that he had seen Mothman flying behind the car when they were on the way to the bowling alley. And then he and his friend Tommy had built a shrine to Mothman. And when they entered this shrine, they had visions of what he thought was the Twin Towers collapsing and New York City burning from 2001. So it was a prophecy he felt that they had gotten as a result of having that shrine there and being influenced by whatever activity was happening in their neck of the woods. But he had felt all along that what was happening in the Ohio River Valley, he felt that the Charleston people really saw Mothman as kind of a Charleston phenomenon rather than a Point Pleasant phenomenon, that it kind of extended all the way down the Kanawha River to Point Pleasant, but that because Mary Hyre and John Keel did most of their investigations in Point Pleasant got more of the PR. So although there were reports that had happened of Mothman in his neighborhood, not as much of it was reported and certainly didn't make it to press the way that things did because of Keel and Mary Hyre and all the work they did. But he talked about being kind of observed, he and Harriet both, in their classes. They were in the same school. They were both observed by people who came to the school who would administer tests. And with the two of them, they both, their experiences manifested differently. Andy's was more on the artistic side, where he said what he would do is he'd be allowed to be able to draw and be able to do artwork throughout school all day long, and nobody would interrupt him. And he just listened to the lectures and was able to remember what the teachers talked about. Harriet, on the other side of the coin, was somebody who had total recall. So if she were to read several pages of a book, she could literally recite the entire thing right back to the people who gave her the tests. And she told us that she had been advanced one grade in school because she tested out, above and beyond what the grade level was, and they tried to boost her up a second one. But I think her mom and dad kind of put the kibosh on that because of the social changes that would bring, not being with kids her own age. So I think that the both of them really, their experiences kind of help them the way that, Keel talks about with UFO people. Oftentimes their IQs will skyrocket and they'll become really more successful in life. And I think with the both of them, Andy through his publishing and his authorship and his research, and then Harriet with the practice that she has held, where she was a therapist and really helped with a lot of post-traumatic stress and growth. She focused in that area. But both of them are very intelligent people. And Andy said this, I don't think Harriet did, but that he didn't feel that he even had art as part of who he was until he had his encounters.
Okay. Maybe a related question for Brian and Steve. With all the reports that Andy Colvin discussed with JACI and Bill, we have similar flying humanoid cryptid creatures, like at the Van Meter visitor case. In about a month or so, Fred will be talking to us about a river monster in the area. Are some of these? And Fred has the flying horse reports as well. Are we? When you start putting together all these almost seemingly mythical creatures, across a wide expanse. Is there some kind of pattern we're seeing with these cryptids, how people respond to them, families of these creatures?
You start, Brian. Brian has investigated a lot of strange winged creatures in Pennsylvania and West Virginia. I'd like to, after he's done, I'd like to say something about the Van Meter visitor.
Okay. Oh, well, we in Pennsylvania, we've had some weird, winged entity reports. Daniel Hagman up in Butler County, Pennsylvania. He had some reports of this creature that they called the Chicora gargoyle, and basically this creature looked like basically like a gargoyle. It was like 7 to 8 foot tall, gray, the wings wrapped around its body, it had a helmeted head, and that was in 2011. And what was interesting, Steve, I know Steve saw the presentation that I gave about the winged entities, and when that came out, 2011, I saw a drawing of that. I had I got goosebumps up and down my arm. I said, I've seen this drawing. I've seen this drawing in Pennsylvania. So, and I happen to remember that. So we have a huge archive. We call it the S files, right? And I had an old, believe it or not, it was a Bigfoot newsletter, believe it or not. And there was this drawing of this creature in Allentown, PA. As about, I think it was about 100 some miles or so from Allentown to Chicora, but it's in 93. It's the exact same thing. And I remember looking it up. I'm like, I know it's it, and I found it. And there happened to be a lady's name and phone number. So I'm like, you know what? The chances that this person is still there or the same person. So I called and I'm like, hello, I got your name out of an old Bigfoot newsletter. Is this you that saw the? It wasn't her. She goes, yeah. She goes, this wasn't me. This was actually like a third party. It was her son's friend, basically. And she said about the encounters. These 4 people were coming home at night after the driving down this dusty road. On the left side of the road, this winged creature was standing there. So we crossed the road, and what was interesting about this, and I've heard this in several other reports, they said this winged being, it walked like a chicken, believe it or not. And the legs were bent backwards from the knees, and it just walked almost kind of like a chicken walked, right? And when it went from the left to the right side of the road, and they said when it got to the edge of the right side of the road, they said that the wings went up and it shot straight up in the sky. Now, they did not say that the wings flapped. It just, the wings went up, to the side, and then it shot straight up in the air. And they were really shook up. They went to the police afterwards, and the, police, they said they seemed really, scared. But, I think they did drive out to the area and check it, but they didn't find anything. And in a couple other reports, actually, Steve, in the one book that you bought me, that you wrote an article in about the winged creatures, I forget what it's called.
Weird Winged Wonders, edited by Timothy Green Beckley.
An excellent book. They talk about a patrolman in a basin, I believe it was Puerto Rico, who saw one of these winged creatures, and he says when it was walking, it walked like a chicken. And I'm like, here's two, there's Puerto Rico and there's the United States and Pennsylvania. These creatures, similar looks, similar the way they walked, wings about, on the side of their body. Jody Cook, too, a researcher out of Ohio, saw he had a drawing of a creature that was, on 2 knees, was on its, like a hunch down, and the drawing was almost similar to these other 2. And I did show the comparison at a talk down in Point Pleasant. It's like, these people didn't know each other. They're drawing the same thing. And all across the world, there's winged entities. Like I know in Indonesia, there's a funny one called the whack whack, believe it or not. And Steve, if you come to Butler this year, you're going to hear a little talk about the whack whack. Me and Terry are talking, so you'll like it.
I will alert the media.
So if you look at it, there's winged creatures all across the whole world, winged beings, winged entities. Choose your. I tend not to say Mothman because I say Mothman for a specific thing down in Point Pleasant. There's another creature in Ohio by the Ravenna Arsenal. Ironically, Steve, it was a munitions plant during World War II. Where did we hear that? Yeah, and there was a Freedom County in Ohio, right by the Ravenna Arsenal. They called it the Freedom Demon. Another winged creature that it was about 70 miles from Chicora and Butler, and that was I think 10 years before that. So again, there is these sightings all the way around the world, and it's just it can't just be coincidence. I know that there's a book that I do want to get. Steve, you may want to get it too. A lady by the name of Margie Kay. She is a MUFON investigator, I believe, out of Missouri. Mm-hmm. And she has a book about winged humanoids out. I want to buy that one next.
Okay.
And she's gotten reports from MUFON, with having to do with UFOs and even winged entities. So, there's something to this, guys. What it is, I don't know. Could these be some interdimensional type creatures? Could they be creatures from UFOs? I mean, people are seeing it. I got a report from Ohio, too, once. Not Idaho, believe it or not, that this one of these winged creatures, entities, was flying alongside of a telephone pole and power lines. So again, they're being seen, and I really haven't pressed this yet, but I think I'm really going to try to get a lot more reports across the United States of these things and dig deeper into that, because it's exciting. Steve, there's not really a lot of people doing research on the winged entities across the country.
Problem with some of those winged entities, it's almost like you get a head-on collision between some things that seem physical and biological, but then there's a high strangeness factor. I mean,
exactly.
Mothman showed up as an apparition sometimes. It wouldn't always flap its wings. The Van Meter visitor looked kind of like a pterodactyl, and over a week, they call it Chad Lewis calls it the Week of Terror in 1903 in Van Meter, Iowa. This thing. Which looked, I guess, a lot like a pterodactyl, but it had weird properties. It had a horn on its beak that seemed to have a light attached to it. When they first saw this thing, they saw the light moving. They thought it was a burglar up on top of a building. And another time, it was in proximity of somebody who was in his room. It exuded some kind of a vapor. Insert your own joke there, but it was something that caused amnesia. I mean, the same kind of missing. I mean, it's like a creature creating missing time. But another time, it was seen standing on top of a telephone pole and climbing down a pole, using its beak the way a parrot would in its cage. And so you get this weird mixture. Keel talked about how people that experience cryptids or experience strange lights in the sky often would suffer the same physical effects. Conjunctivitis, thirst, muscle ache. Remember Connie Carpenter driving by the Mason County golf course, saw the Mothman. It flew over her car. The next day, she had eye burn, the way a lot of people do with close proximity to UFOs. One more point. Zelia Edgar has written a great book called Just Another Tinfoil Hat Presents. She's a Keelian, and she was dealing with some of these bizarre creatures like the Enfield Horror, 3 legs, arms protruding out of its chest, and pink glowing eyes. Good Lord. Well, I hate to think what the mother and father looked like. But she coined this great phrase, lost in transmogrification. As you Keelians know, Keel talked about these things as being possible constructs, transmogrifications of energy. And so it's almost like, and she also called them flopped projections. If these things are in fact some kind of manifestation, co-creation with us, whether they're tulpas or the collective unconscious, whatever, it's almost like every once in a while they just come out wrong, or you only see them a couple times. What about the Dover Demon? That poor little guy was only seen a couple times. He looked kind of like an emaciated gray without a spaceship. And we can all think of these bizarre creatures. I think the Jersey Devil wings were never big enough to lift it off the ground. So it's it has this. That's what That's what we're dealing with is the high strangeness factor. It's people are seeing these things. The patterns are there, but to try and really put these things together as strictly physical flesh and blood, paraphysical is as close, like Brian said, as I can come to.
And let's not forget about the Chicago Mothman, who had, coincidentally, the first reported sighting was 12 years ago today. And that's the same thing. It's being reported as being different sizes and shapes and appearances.
You know, there was one sighting that looked like our Mothman. I'm going to call him my Mothman here in the Ohio Valley. And that was 3 years before the Scarberries and the Mallets were chased down Route 62 in Kent, England. These kids were coming home from a dance. They saw a light come down behind a grove of trees, and then it disappeared, and then the light reappeared, and then they saw this creature shuffling along. It looked just like the creature that the Scarberries and the Mallets saw by the Old North Power Plant, only this one didn't have red glowing eyes. Everything else they dub as Mothman, or just for convenience, doesn't really reflect, I think, whatever happened here in the mid-'60s in Point Pleasant.
You know, it really doesn't either. Go ahead, Mark.
I was just going to nonsensically ramble. I'm sure you have something more intelligent to say.
Oh, you humor me. I nonsensically ramble all the time. I was just going to kind of dovetail on what Jackie was talking about with the alleged, Chicago Mothman phenomenon and all that. I'd forgotten that it was 12 years ago today when that whole thing kind of kicked off. But again, I mean, what we found, because Jackie and I got involved with the Illinois State Director for the Mutual UFO Network, a guy by the name of Sam Moranto, and we met him about 4 or 5 years ago. He was the lead for MUFON's investigation into the alleged Chicago flap, and he and I were kind of of the same school of thought, and the three of us, Jackie as well, where we were not quite sure what was happening in Chicago, but wow, it was cool that something was happening in Chicago because we're close. But what we found in the time that we investigated what was happening there wasn't really a lot in common with Point Pleasant at all. And it really seemed like more of an effort to really kind of draft off of the 50th anniversary of the bridge disaster. When books came out and all the different things were happening, it just seemed to be a stretch of reality. And we didn't notice any high strangeness taking place in the Chicago reports at all. I mean, it was basically just, I saw this, I got scared, and we'll go back and interview these people later and find out what else has developed. And that was pretty much it. But I also wanted to mention, because Brian brought her up, that we do know Margie Kay. Actually, we did a presentation to the Missouri MUFON people a few years ago to talk about really Sam's investigation into the Chicago phenomena. And we met her through that. And actually, we were invited to present at her first X-Con, which is coming up in October. The jury's still kind of out whether we can make the trip or not. But, yeah, she's a very, I think, respected researcher. And she does a really nice job with the channel that she does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you and Jackie had a well done interview with and Steve. You mentioned Chad's book on the Van Meter visitor, and provided some descriptions of this cryptid, possible flying humanoid. Chad will be a presenter too, right?
Yes, and it was Chad Lewis, Kevin Nelson, and Noah Voss that wrote the Van Meter Visitor. Very, they stumbled onto this little piece of folklore. It was so cool. But Chad will be speaking there on the Wendigo. He and Kevin Nelson, and I think Noah was included. Yes, and Noah Voss wrote the book on the Wendigo lore.
Uh-huh.
Kevin Nelson will be there, and I believe his talk is on things like the Slender Man, these sort of digital cryptids or creations. I think that's going to be the subject of his talk. So it's a pretty good lineup.
I remember Chad, 4 or 5 years ago. I thought he did. I thought he was a very nice guy. I thought his presentation was really good too. I hope he'll have a few copies of his Van Meter Visitor, and he's speaking Saturday at 3, and he's followed by Kevin at 4 on Saturday.
Right.
How's the new venue for the speakers?
I haven't been in it, but it's a VFW hall just down the street, within easy walking distance from the museum. So that's one of the things we were worried about, because the place we had it last year is no longer available. The State Theater, unfortunately, is in very bad shape, and where they used to have it on the amphitheater, it would have to. The weather would have to cooperate, but, very hard concrete seats with the sun beating down, and very difficult to have any kind of a visual display behind you. So Jeff always does a phenomenal job. I don't know how he does it, putting all this together.
Okay, so that's at the VFW.
Right. Just right. It's on the opposite side of the museum, and just down a block or so.
Okay. Good. So, let's look at Andrew Smith is going to be presenting Saturday at 6 o'clock. He's been a guest with us. He'll be discussing the Flatwoods Monster.
Right.
He's a very knowledgeable speaker on the Flatwoods Monster. I think that's nice that there's such a open connection between two competing West Virginia unexplained monsters. But Andrew will be there. And Mark Randall has worked on Linda Sigmund's book.
Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit about Linda's book and or Mark's artistic contributions?
Well, I've got her book will be here from Amazon tomorrow, and Mark does a phenomenal job. He and I did a book together called High Strangeness, and it's all about the year of the Garuda, the Mothman encounter in the mid-'60s, and his artwork is phenomenal. He wrote most of the pieces in it. I wrote 4 of them. John Keel, the Men in Black, the Silver Bridge, and one other one I can't remember. Bill, us writers just can't remember the stuff we wrote 5 minutes ago. But anyway, so, he just does I haven't seen the illustrations yet, but he does an amazing job. And it was, like I say, Linda was on my show, and we went through the whole thing. She and her boyfriend were out 12 miles north, and they had it's you have to get the book because it's a very bizarre experience. It's not simply seeing this creature or apparition and a strange light. There's a lot more to it. There was some missing time and so forth. And even she had a strange encounter the early December right in downtown Point Pleasant, where she saw a couple of very strange looking men dressed alike that they were classic Men in Black. And she didn't as to what they were until years later when she read John Keel's book. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, it sounds like a fascinating story.
and she's very, very credible.
Okay. And I really enjoy Mark's artwork. I have he autographed I was a Braxy poster.
Oh, okay.
For me, he does some really interesting artwork. How does he create the effects? It seems like maybe he's using an actual photo, and he's works in say Mothman into the foreground. Steve, do you know how he does?
You know what? I wish I did, and I wish I had the skills that he did.
He's effective.
I have made some posters that were kind of tributes and spoofs to the old UFO report, and my technique is to piece it together. If I had his talent and knowledge, I could shorten the time and to put that together.
Oh, I think Mark is a very talented artist. To check in with Linda about her new book. That one sounds good. And Steve, you have Chatan Noir discussing.
Chatan Noir. She'll be talking about the Piazza bird and some kind of underwater panther. I can't pronounce the name of it. I guess we might as well go through and just talk about briefly the rest of them that'll be there. Faye Laporte, known as Faye DeWitt, one of the early experiencers of the Mothman. She went out there with her siblings. Her brother was driving, and man, it was a big joke until they saw it running next to the car. And you've already mentioned Andrew Smith. James McCormick is going to be speaking on UFOs and national security. Chris Reiser, the legend, life, and curse of Chief Cornstalk, and some unknown guy. He looks very handsome, though, named Steve Ward, is going to be talking about John Keel and the Mothman prophecies. Do you notice a running theme here at all?
Yeah, I've noticed that, and there's also a little bit of a heavy metal theme that we've gotten into tonight. So it's nice getting to know you, so that we can have little comments like that. Makes for a fun, personalized show.
It's always fun ripping on Brian. I will say that.
Start, Ward. Hey, Steve, I do want you to know, Sally is sitting here. She recognizes your voice, and she's looking at the phone, so I think she misses you.
Really? Oh, I miss her, too. I wonder if she were to meet my three cats, what the meeting would be like. She probably would spit at them.
Yeah, she doesn't like other cats.
Oh, well.
I love your cats, though, Steve. They were awesome. I can't wait to see them again.
Well, your cat's a sweetheart, too. So, as you can tell, we're cat lovers, I guess.
Okay. So, let's see what. Oh, I have another question about the River Museum. Steve, what's going on with that? I'm really intrigued since I have developed this. I think Barbara could tell you an obsession with the Ohio River.
The latest I've heard is they're planning on having it open for the festival. Now, I was lucky enough to be in the river. It burned down, or at least part of it burned several years ago. And not too long before that, a friend of ours, John Lee, and I decided on a whim to go down to see the River Museum. We'd never seen it, and it was phenomenal. I mean, the history of the river and the commerce, the models of the boats. They had a thing upstairs where you could simulate driving a tugboat on the river. One time I almost drove up on Main Street, so I didn't really get my license to do that. But it just so well put together. So I hope they have preserved most of the what was in there. It looks like a nice brand new building, and I just hope that they can have it open in time for the festival.
Okay, so where is the River Museum located? Is that towards the Two-End-Wee Park?
Yes, on the same side as the Mothman Museum. If you go a little further, you'll hit the coffee pot where you can get coffee and a wrap. And a little further is another one of Jeff's stores, Bunker 304, which is kind of a vinyl shop and a throwback to his criminal record chain that he used to have years ago. If you go, and then you go next to that, or right about next to that, is the River Museum. If you go just north of the Mothman Museum, you'll hit the Point Pleasant Trading Company, which is very well put together. There's more, just everything in there, more T-shirts, more cool stuff. I brought a license plate that says Frogman 1955. And anybody that knows about the Loveland Frogman knows he was seen in 1955. So they just have a lot of cool stuff like that.
Cool. Okay. JACI and Bill, you also bring up the Garuda from Indian folklore. Andy discusses it in his section. How does the Garuda fit into Mothman legacy? Is it just a cousin to the Mothman? Is it something, a very similar type flying humanoid?
Well, the Garuda in Eastern tradition really was at the top of the list of possibilities that Keel thought Mothman was. And basically, Garuda is the Eastern equivalent to what in the West here natives would call the Thunderbird. So really more in the Buddhist tradition, that would be the equivalent of Thunderbird. Or if we're looking at a totem pole, at the top of the totem pole is where the Thunderbird lies. Above human beings, or ostensibly Garuda/Thunderbird would be kind of an intermediary between humanity and the gods, so to speak, or God. So that was really what Keel thought that Mothman could be. In fact, his choice for the name of the Mothman prophecies really was the year of the Garuda, because he had felt that the Garuda had made its presence known in Point Pleasant. And in Andy's interpretation of Garuda, meaning a protector deity or like a first responder or a harbinger, something that kind of warns of impending disaster, doesn't cause it, but warns about it, or talks about some type of inequality between what's going on in the world and what should be going on. And certainly a bridge disaster is not an ideal situation to happen to any community.
Although when we interviewed Susan Sayer, we had a conversation about that Mothman, because people link Mothman with the bridge disaster, and we didn't have any findings to that, but we did have a conversation that that maybe Mothman did save Point Pleasant, because if it hadn't been for Jeff Walmsley finding all of his father's clippings of the Mothman reporting done by Mary Heyer, he would not have been able to open. I mean, he opened the museum, and if that museum hadn't opened, Point Pleasant would just be another little dying town in America. And you know the Wamsleys have brought Point Pleasant back to the map.
I agree. Jeff has just done a phenomenal job, as well as Steve, and what the positive attention that your book has brought to the Valley as well. And when you're talking about the Garuda and the Thunderbirds, it just seems like, the Van, and Steve mentioned the Van Meter visitor, the Chicago Mothman. I think a lot of tonight's discussion, it just seems like a repetition of the same type of creature seen across the world, and then you throw in these two examples of 46 people dying from during a bridge collapse, and you get a couple other examples of bridge collapses happened on the same date, different years, but the same date. It just seems like there is some kind of interconnectedness that is emerging as we continue with these discussions. And I don't think we got into this last year, but everyone has contributed more information about these the repetition of dates or appearances of the animals. Did Keel have any theories that he developed out of all of his research that would somehow explain all of this information?
That'll only take about 3 hours to answer, Bill.
Yeah.
Do you want to start?
Well, I guess, and I was thinking too, with Keel, the entire Mothman Prophecies book, the way that he went about writing that and telling the story of what happened in Point Pleasant and what was also happening really simultaneously in Long Island, New York, where he was receiving all types of prophetic information from some sources that could be otherworldly, could be maybe he was a little hoaxed or what have you, but the Long Island end of things is really fascinating in and of itself. That's probably a story for another day, but I mean, really, it seemed to me that he felt that he was receiving all types of prophecies about things that were going to happen. He talked about the assassination attempt on the Pope at that time, in I think 1968, if I remember correctly. And the Pope was not assassinated, but there was an attempt. It was stopped, thankfully, so his life was spared. But then certainly Dr. Martin Luther King, he received a prophecy that was going to take place, that he was going to be assassinated. He had the month wrong, but the date right, because his source didn't give him the exact date. He kind of felt like whatever these intelligences were, they only saw like part of the picture of what was going to happen. And either they were outright toying with him and misdirecting him, or they couldn't really tune into the future exactly as to what was going to happen. So, he felt that he was getting these different prophecies, although he never necessarily tied them in with Mothman per se, but there were other people who were getting, psychic visions of presence that were floating in water, which is really one of the more prominent themes that took place when the Silver Bridge collapsed, with the presence that floated up, out of the cars from people who were shopping for their families. And, really, he never could quite piece the whole thing together, but he did, to some degree, hold himself responsible for not knowing that what was going to happen in the Ohio Valley, because he knew something was going to happen. So there was a feeling in the air. It was palpable. You just knew something was going to happen. But he could never quite pinpoint that it was the bridge. He thought it was a power plant that was going to explode or some other kind of disaster. But how do you know this? I mean, how can you really ever know this? I mean, I feel bad that he held himself responsible in that way.
That's one of the reasons I don't believe Mothman was a harbinger. If I've kind of joked about it, but it's not really funny. If you really are a harbinger, can't you be more specific? Don't just chase cars and scare the hell out of people. Send some kind of concrete message where people might be aware that there's a problem with the bridge. John Keel used the term ultra-terrestrial, which he borrowed from his friend Ivan Sanderson. It was kind of a literary device. He thought that whatever this was going on was a natural condition of the planet, even though it might be sort of extra-dimensional. He seemed to think that this was reflective, that we co-created some of this. And if you watch the development of UFOs and the strange lights in the sky over time, they do kind of change or manifest and always seem to be a little bit ahead of us. So he had gotten rid of the extraterrestrial hypothesis by the end of the 60s, although he backtracked a little bit on that. He was certain that there was more than one answer, and he didn't have all the answers. But Mark alluded to, there was a whole series of events that are not in the Mothman prophecies, just a little bit. Doug Skinner has preserved all kinds of good stuff from those writings. And Andy Colvin republished several of them in books like The Big Blackout and The Big Breakthrough. But these are events that happened more on Long Island. But if you read between the lines, most of this stuff is coming through channelers or people saying they're having these experiences, not so much John Keel having the experiences. So suggests that a lot of these things might not be. I mean, a lot of channeling is deceptive. It's not all channeling is not created equal. Some is there, it seems to be at a very high level, and others isn't. To kind of sum this up, in the Eighth Tower, he talks about how some of these transmogrifications of energy seem to last a while, do what they do, and then melt away. But he also thought that he said, I am embarrassed that I was sitting out in the hills and the woods, talking to these entities through channelers and so forth, and taking them seriously for a while, because there was quite a trickster element to a lot of this stuff, and it was as evidenced when the Silver Bridge collapsed and they were completely misdirected as to what happened.
Steve, what all the information you just presented sounds like, we can go back to one of the shows Barbara did 3 years ago, maybe, with Mark Stavish and, the egregores.
Oh, yeah.
That's one of the things, discussion is like, just one of those times you start getting all these, scholars of this unexplained phenomenon together. And, sometimes you get them eventually bring up, that people may have been in the right frame of mind to start thinking something to come alive, there is that possibility. And when Mark was a guest with Barbara, they went into a lot more detail about it based on his book. But all the examples we've looked at tonight, it gives more credibility to that ancient concept that Mark brings up. That goes back to I think ancient Greece. At least, I think that's where he started his book. I just thought that everyone's contributions tonight just makes you have to wonder about those possibilities. I think that's one of the nice things about having the four of you as guests tonight.
Well, may I add one other thing?
Sure.
I think Keel was really onto something when he talked about paranormal mimicry and the reflective factor, and when he would entertain certain ideas about his research, and then he would find examples would come to him that would support that belief system. Remember, he told us belief was the enemy, but it's also, I think, very likely that we're also dealing with, even Keel in Strange Creatures from Time and Space said that he thought some of these cryptids were in fact flesh and blood creatures. And he named the Eddy as a possibility, and he named some of the lake monsters. I think it's very likely that some of these entities we're dealing with are physical entities. I don't know that they're ET. I don't know where they come from. Magonia, maybe. But it seems like we're dealing with some kind of a duality. And for the life of me, I don't know if that premise is true. For the life of me, I don't know how we can possibly sort some of them out. Say, oh, this is strictly paranormal and high strangeness, but no, this is a flesh and blood entity that is here for some particular reason.
Well, I don't think you. Maybe my cryptid research might be more of looking at things as more of it's a flesh and blood creature, and I've just kind of wondered for a long time if Mothman or Thunderbirds could be more of a parts of a surviving family of pterodactyls that might live in sparsely populated communities. But you also can't rule out some of the thoughts that people may have that generate them to come to life. In the Bible, you have something like people praying together can bring changes. It's kind of about the same kind of topic.
Two or more are gathered together.
Yes, that's it. It gives almost basically the. It's the same principle. I don't think the Bible was referencing Mothman, but the ideas that Mark Stavish has in his book. And I think he started with the Greeks. It's kind of maybe around the same time period. It shows that the concept has been around for a long time and it works. I just think everyone contributed some really interesting points tonight. I think we got more involved in this than we have in previous discussions.
But it's there's so many oddities. I mean, the Houston Batman from the 50s seemed like some guy in a flying suit, you know. Some people were seeing these Thunderbirds, but they were glowing. I remember Keel wrote somewhere one time he thought that if the entity or whatever it is glowing, the chances are it's paranormal. I can't remember the source, but yeah, I've really enjoyed the discussion tonight. Very nice to get together with a bunch of weirdos that follow the same stuff that I do.
Yeah, that's us.
That's us.
In a good way, of course.
Of
and
course.
Nice to meet you, Brian.
Yeah, you too, man. I can't wait to meet you guys in person.
We look forward to that too.
You know, Brian, when you're going to be doing your Cabela's presentation, what's going on with that? Your discussion. Are there other people? You're going to be at Cabela's in the Highlands in November.
Yeah, November. I think it's. I don't have the calendar right here in front of me. I think the 18th, 19th. That would be the right before Thanksgiving, and we're going to have on that Friday. We're going to have a town hall, which hopefully people come out and tell us their encounters. Hopefully, it did better than the Tomlinson Run, where no one really wanted to talk except some of the people that we brought in to talk about their encounters. And then the next day we're going to have, I think it's, the event's going to run from 10 to 5, but our presentations, I think we're going to run 11 to 5. We have 5 speakers. I guess I can announce them, although we're announcing them on Facebook one at a time. We're going to have Les Odell. We're going to have Doug Waller, Dan Hagman, Bill Rigby, and lastly, me and Fred, which we're going to be on first, but, and we all hope, we hope to really generate some more sightings down there from around the tri-state area. And we hope it's a good event, a free event. So if you're in the area, come on down. It's going to be in a small conference room. So get there early. The last time they had it downstairs. This year it's going to be upstairs in the conference room. We'll have some vendor tables selling some things. So we're really looking forward to having it. Thanks to Fred Saluga, who went down there and asked them why they don't have it anymore, because they used to have it years ago. Thanks to Fred, it's continuing, and we're going to help, co-sponsor it with Bass Pro and Cabela's.
Yeah, the Cabela's had Dr. Jeff Meldrum there. I met him after his presentation on Bigfoot. He makes a very compelling presentation about skin movement and muscles. The Patterson Gimlin film does not reveal someone in a suit.
Yeah, we were there for that. We were there for all of them, and Fred and I actually did speak at one of the events. And one of the funnier stories is when I was talking about mountain lion reports, and I said, well, when you talk about mountain lion reports, if you type in cougar, you're really not going to get about cougars. You're going to cougar also has another meaning. And I told my wife I was. Yeah, and I told my wife I was sorry. I wasn't looking for that, but people laughed at that. They thought that was a good one.
Well, there's Mark's next show.
That was probably just going to go directly to being banned.
Well, it would be Mark's last show, but it could be the next one.
There's been one case where Barbara got kind of mad about one show, and YouTube banned a couple other. One they just got pulled down after being on YouTube for a while. I've had a couple of those, but they weren't really controversial topics. But anyhow, I don't want to push my luck with with that one, but the Panthers, and I can actually do something about on that one. It'd be a short show, but there is information I could develop, but we're down to a couple more minutes. But Jackie and Bill, do you have any concluding remarks? Any other conferences you want to plug other than the Mothman Festival?
Well, we're supposed to be doing a book signing at the River Museum the Friday before the Mothman Festival, so it'd be on the 15th. And then Bill mentioned it that the ex-con is scheduled. They changed the date, so we're not absolutely positive we're going to be there, but we're planning with hopes that we could be there, and that is October 30th, 31st, and November 1st, and that is in Springfield, Missouri.
Oh, okay. Nice. Okay, and everyone will have to, if you're going to be in Point Pleasant on Friday the 15th, after you see Jackie and Bill's presentation, you can meet all of us at the Village Pizza. And
I will be speaking at the Exeter UFO Festival with Mac Maloney's gang on Labor Day weekend. The next week, I'm going to go to the Flatwoods Festival just to hang out. Mm-hmm. And leading up to the Mothman Festival, I will be in the TNT area. Well, I'll be working on my talk, of course, but I'll be in the TNT area hanging up big, creepy crawlies with red glowing eyes to scare the hell out of the attendees at the tour.
Cool. And let's see, how's your work with Mac going? He has an interesting book on ancient crafts from the Roman period, Greeks. How's that going? And every other.
Well, his show is a lot of fun. You never know what's going to happen. I usually do a fringe report, and it's oftentimes. Jeffrey Talkington, a friend of ours, when he hears my show, The High Strangeness Factor, and hears me on another show, he says it should be a drinking game. Every time Steve says John Keel, you take a drink. Of course, she would last 5 minutes.
Okay, so all right, so, we'll see everyone at the Mothman Festival. We're just out of time. Thank you, and we will talk to you next week.
Thanks for having us.
Oh, yeah, thanks.